This morning we thought we'd have a change of pace and we're going to go for a river walk. So we're going to walk from our camp all the way down through the river or drainage line to our big dam and see what we can see on the way. So while we walk through the drainage line, you'll actually see that there's quite a bit of different types of reeds. So this is actually a papyrus, it's dwarf papyrus, and you can make paper out of this. What you do is you will flatten it and then weave them together like normal papyrus paper. A drainage line, it's not like a normal river. It's filled up by rainwater. So when the rain stops, the water drops down. It's not a constantly flowing water. But the thing is, there's still water underneath the sand, and the animals just have to dig for it. And elephants, as we can see here, they are one of the main culprits for digging for water, and lots of other animals will actually rely on them as we get into the drier season to find water. Even us, if you're looking for a primitive way of finding water, you can actually use the hole that the elephant has dug. Now we tracked this elephant down the river a little bit, not too far. Camp is right here, and we found a nice fresh sign of digging for water. Now we're going to harvest a bit of water for this. I'm going to show you how to do it. Yeah, so you can actually see how perfectly clear the water is. So the water actually gets filtered through the sand. So it's perfectly safe to drink for us even, especially if the river or the drainage line starts inside the reserve. So have a look at how beautifully clear it is after it's been filtered through the sand. Crisp spring water. One of the benefits of getting off on foot is you get to see the smaller things that you usually wouldn't see from the vehicle, like this porcupine quill. So a porcupine is the largest rodent in Africa. It sits about this high off the ground. One of the things, there's a bit of a myth about porcupines that they have the ability to shoot the quills out, and it's not true. But what they will do is, when they're feeling threatened, they'll turn their back towards whatever is trying to hurt them, the predator, and they will raise all these quills and then run backwards into what they perceive as a threat. And then, because these quills have small backwards facing barbs on the front, they will go into the skin and then get stuck, and they won't be able to be pulled out of the predator. So often you'll see predators with, especially leopards and even crocodiles, with quills going through their face, some new facial piercings. Saddle-billed stork, one of the really beautiful bigger storks that we have in our area. And it's actually only 50 to 100 breeding pairs found in the greater Kruger National Area where we are. Lion tracks. You can see that actually relatively fresh lion tracks, because the substrate is not the easiest of substrates to hold a track, but you can see this full definition in these tracks. You can see the 3 lobes at the back, which would make it to be a cat. Hyenas won't have 3 lobes, they'll only have 2 lobes. And then you'll see the really larger toes, and they're quite close to the pad. But what's interesting here, and you'll often hear trackers talk about how hyenas have claws and cat tracks don't have claws, but you can clearly see the claw marks in this lion track. Now what often happens with cats in general is that when they get into a substrate that then maybe grosses them out a little bit, they'll bring their claws out like this. Or she was maybe picked up a little bit of speed coming down the embankment, and then she just trotted through. That will also bring the claws out as well. You see here we found a nice big piece of pottery. You can clearly see that it's been man-made. They used a fire inside the pot to harden it, to like the kiln when you're making a normal pottery. And what's quite interesting is you'll see that they put some very intricate patterning on it. So you can actually tell the age of pottery from how defined it is and refined and perfected it is. In the early days it was very basic, just mud put together and then put into an oven, so it looked really, really rough. And then through the years of constantly doing it, the practice got finer and finer and finer until you get to what we have here. And then it would even go even past this, and it would be even more beautiful with paint and beads set into it. Out in the bush, especially on foot, all your senses actually come into play. Your sense of smell, your sense of hearing, your sense of sight. And as we walk through here, we got this beautiful smell of home cooking. And that's this plant just behind me. So this plant is actually a wild sage. So this is that wild sage. Absolutely gorgeous. And as you get close to it, you can just get overpowered smell of. But one of the more interesting uses of this tree, because first of all, sage is a natural insecticide or mosquito repellent. If you take a nice long branch, you can actually use it as a fly swatter. And because of the fragrant oils, it leaves that oil on your skin, which will then work to keep the flies and mozzies away. So as we walk further down the drainage line, we actually came across one of those more rougher bits of pottery. You can see how there's quite a bit more stones, and it's not as perfectly refined as that piece of pottery that we found earlier. They say that nothing in nature is perfect, but this comes very, very close. So this is the nest of what they call a paper wasp. So the paper wasp will actually build this honeycomb structure and then put its larvae inside these holes. So in 2012 there was a terrible flood that came through, and quite a few of the reserves within South Africa were actually hit and affected quite badly of it. And you can actually see the power of that water by this massive stump that's been deposited. So that is where the water level stopped, where it got hooked up there, and that piece of wood there will be quite heavy. So the power to actually get it up there and wedge it into that tree is incredible. So the tree that it's actually stuck in is called a leadwood, and it's known for being a very, very strong, dense wood. And it was actually one of the only trees that really didn't get that badly affected when the flood came through. Lots of your more weaker trees like apple leaves or more rulers got completely washed away, but the leadwoods were able to withstand the pressure of that water. So with all the tracks that we've been seeing in this river this morning, it shows that these lines have been up and down and up and down. But this is what for me is very, very interesting, because this here is a cub track. Look at the size of the track in comparison to my hand, which for me as a trails guide, first of all, it tells us that we have to be very, very careful. First of all, we don't want to do anything that's going to put these youngsters in danger. Just by us walking through, we don't want that. So we need to be careful of that, and of course Mom will be a bit more protective over those cubs if we do come bump into them on foot. So we must just be careful of that. So these tracks are a bit more difficult to see, but can you see here, over here is a female, could be Mom, but here are these little cub tracks. So this is why I'll say this is Mom, because the cub is following the larger female. There we go. Look at that little cub track up there. So we bumped into a breeding herd of elephants, well, what we reckon to be a breeding herd of elephants, but they were in the very, very thick bush, so we didn't push ourselves in there. But we can clearly see that they were literally just here. They had just dug up the water, what we talked about earlier, and you can see the very, very clear tracks as one individual came to dig, one or two individuals came to dig, and then the rest of the herd would have come through and drank out of those 2 or 3 holes. So all good things do come to an end, and this is Big Dam, our finish line. Hope you enjoyed it. It's so special to actually just wander through these gorgeous riverine areas.